The next day, Tabo was miserable. He knew he was in the wrong, and he kept circling me, muttering half-hearted apologies. I finally cut him off. "I want you to call your mother," I instructed, my voice flat. "And you will force her to apologize." A real apology, in front of me. Tabo, desperate to fix things, called Zola. An hour later, she arrived, arms crossed, face like thunder. The apology was as toxic as I expected. "I'm sorry you felt that way, Naledi," she said, stressing the word felt. "But honestly, police's news is more important to the family lineage. You two have been trying for a while." Her words twisted the knife, bringing up our private struggles with fertility. I clenched my jaw. I didn't play the recording yet. I was waiting for the perfect moment. Then, Zola delivered her next escalation, seemingly unaware that the apology failure was secondary. "Since Polisa is carrying the future," she announced, "I've decided her baby shower needs to be a big family event. I've booked the venue for the second weekend in May." My mind raced. The second weekend in May was the weekend Tabo and I had booked and paid for our romantic getaway to the Caribbean, our deferred anniversary trip. Zola smiled, pure malice in her eyes. "You two can always go another time, dear. Family first." It was a deliberate, two-part strike. Ruin the birthday, steal the anniversary. I looked at Tabo, who didn't even try to protest. He was paralyzed by her manipulation. The truth of my enemy's persistence was clear, and the stakes kept climbing. My work was my refuge. I wasn't just Tabo's wife. I was the marketing director for Zola's family business, the Sunset Kitchen Catering Company. I had built their social media, secured their contracts, and was the true creative force behind their recent success. That morning, I needed to distract myself, so I opened my work laptop to draft a new proposal for a major corporate event. I typed in my usual password, but it failed. I tried again, thinking I'd mistyped. Access denied. Panic started to set in. I called Tabo, who was already at the company warehouse. He sounded nervous. "Just try the old password," he suggested weakly. I knew that wouldn't work. Finally, I called Zola herself. She answered on the second ring, her tone sickeningly sweet. "Naledi, darling. Still thinking about the business?" "Zola," I said, keeping my voice steady. "My password has been changed. I need access to the client list and the financials." She chuckled, a cold, grating sound. "Oh, that." Yes, I had my personal IT consultant change it. "You see, family business is for family now, Naledi. We need someone more reliable handling the books during this sensitive time." She had locked me out. Financially locked out of the very business I had saved and built. It was a direct, calculated move to sever my ties and destroy my professional value. The financial escalation confirmed everything. This wasn't just personal. Zola wanted me completely out of their lives, and she was willing to destroy my career to do it. The betrayal was complete. I felt lost, sitting in my expensive apartment, unable to work. My career was on hold. My marriage strained, and my professional identity was stolen. I needed to talk to someone who understood. I called Polisa, Tabo's sister. She was 2 months pregnant, and the reason Zola felt she could treat me like dirt. I was bracing myself for awkwardness, maybe even a little gloating. Instead, Polisa sounded genuinely distressed. "Naledi, I am so sorry about your birthday. I was going to tell you the news next week privately. I'm furious with Mama," she confessed. This was the first unexpected twist in my favor. We met for lunch. Polisa was quiet at first, but then she opened up. She told me about Zola's controlling nature and how she used Polisa's pregnancy to demand attention. "She's always manipulating situations," Polisa whispered, leaning closer. "She even exaggerates her own health issues to make Daddy and Tabo feel guilty." The other week, she told Tabo her blood pressure was dangerously high because she disagreed with his inventory order. Polisa then dropped a much bigger piece of information. "Mama has been acting strangely about the company books lately. She's hiding things. She keeps going on about the old recipe ledger, saying she has to keep it safe from unreliable hands." I listened, a plan beginning to form. Polisa was the unexpected ally I needed. She wasn't just giving me emotional support, she was giving me strategic intelligence. The unreliable hands Zola was afraid of were my own. The recipe ledger. It was the heart of the Sunset Kitchen, containing the ancient, prize-winning recipes that made the catering company famous. Zola treated it like the family crown jewels, often saying the recipes were worth more than any property they owned. Polisa confirmed my suspicion. She never lets it out of sight, she explained. When she's home, it's either under her mattress or, when she leaves the house, she puts it in the old floor safe in the kitchen pantry. Polisa described the safe, a rusty metal box hidden beneath a loose tile. She thinks no one knows the combination, but Dad showed me years ago. It's their old wedding anniversary date, May 24th, 78. My heart pounded. I now had a clear target, the family's most valuable asset and, more importantly, the place where Zola would likely hide other secrets. It was a classic hidden lever for power situation. The realization that I might have leverage against Zola, something she truly valued, sent a jolt of cold excitement through me. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about regaining control and exposing Zola's hypocrisy. My mind immediately went into planning mode. I had to get into that safe. The stakes were no longer about my job. They were about the family's legacy, which Zola was treating like her personal bargaining chip. Police's information was more than an advantage. It was an invitation to fight back. The day after my lunch with Polisa, the opportunity arrived. Zola was out for her weekly bridge club game. Polisa and I orchestrated a diversion. We went to Zola's house under the flimsy excuse of dropping off leftover birthday gifts. Taba was at the warehouse, still trying to sort out the accounts I had been locked out of. Polisa was the lookout, feigning an interest in Zola's garden. I slipped into the kitchen. My hands were slick with sweat as I knelt in the pantry, moving the bags of rice and flour. I found the loose tile, pried it up with a kitchen knife, and there it was, the rusty, heavy floor safe. My fingers trembled as I turned the dial, carefully setting the combination 0 to 5, 2 to 4, 7 to 8. The lock clicked. I took a deep, shaky breath and pulled the heavy door open. Inside was the famous leather-bound ledger, smelling faintly of spices and age. I quickly photographed every page of the prize-winning recipes. Success. But then, tucked beneath the ledger, I found an unexpected stack of papers. They weren't personal letters. They were unpaid tax bills for the Sunset Kitchen, dating back 2 years. The amounts were huge. My stomach dropped. Zola wasn't just hoarding the recipes. She was hiding a financial time bomb. I photographed the documents, replaced everything, and sealed the safe. I left Zola's house with the most powerful leverage possible, the recipe and the evidence of her colossal failure. The next morning, I drove to the office of Mr. Themba, a trusted family accountant who had always been a quiet supporter of my marketing efforts. I laid the stack of bills and documents on his desk. He went pale as he reviewed them. "Naledi, this is catastrophic," he muttered, adjusting his spectacles. "Mrs. Zola has been hiding expenses and delaying payments for almost 3 years. The penalties alone are massive. The company is on the verge of a massive IRS audit, and we could lose everything." He explained that Zola had been using the company's operating funds to cover her own lavish lifestyle and then shuffling the debt around, hoping her creative accounting would hold up. The financial bomb was not just large, it was about to explode. The thriving business I had worked so hard for was actually a house of cards Zola had built out of hubris and greed. She had locked me out not to stop me from marketing, but to stop me from seeing the truth. The family business was failing, not thriving. This explained everything. Her desperation to control every detail, her paranoia about the recipes, and her recent secretive meetings. Zola was terrified of being exposed as the destroyer, not the protector, of the family's legacy. My anger solidified into a cold, professional determination. This was no longer just an abusive mother-in-law problem. It was an impending corporate disaster that I was now uniquely positioned to solve or expose. I spent the next 2 days working in secret with Mr. Themba, poring over the documents. It was clear Zola was not only mismanaging the accounts, but was also actively preparing an exit strategy. I discovered a thread of emails between Zola and a high-profile corporate lawyer representing a major catering chain called the Golden Spoon. The emails confirmed my worst fears. The Golden Spoon had been making discreet, aggressive offers to buy the Sunset Kitchen at a steep, fire sale discount, clearly aware of the company's financial vulnerability. Zola, desperate to cover the debt and avoid jail time, was preparing to sell the entire family legacy for pennies on the dollar and walk away with a small payoff. She was going to betray her own son and daughter for her own skin. This was the external threat, the final escalation. The rival company was going to swallow us whole within the month. I realized Zola's cruelty was not just personal, but utterly reckless and destructive to everyone she claimed to love. She was a coward preparing to run, hiding behind a facade of maternal authority. I printed every email, every contract draft, and every unpaid bill. I gathered the digital copy of the sacred recipe ledger. The time for talking or even passive resistance was over. I had all the ammunition, but the most important step had to be taken by my husband. I waited until Tabo came home that evening, tired and defeated after another useless day trying to bypass his mother's new passwords. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply laid out the evidence on the dining room table. The tax bills, the contract drafts, the emails with the golden spoon, and the printed recipes. "This is it, Tabo," I said, my voice steady. "The business you love, the legacy you claim to protect, is 2 weeks away from being sold for nothing by your mother, who is hiding massive debt and facing the IRS. He read the documents, his face draining of color, finally seeing the full, ugly truth. His jaw dropped when he saw the draft contract with the golden spoon. She wouldn't, he stammered, his denial weak. I looked him straight in the eye. She did it to my birthday, Tabo. She did it to my career. Of course, she would do it to the business. She prioritizes her control and her image over everything. I gave him the ultimatum. You have one choice left, Tabo. You take immediate, decisive action right now. You must publicly confront Zola with this evidence, or I will. But if you don't stand up for me, for your sister, and for this business today, then I will walk away. Our marriage will be over. I can't build a life with a man who lets his mother destroy us all." The relationship crisis was immediate and final. Tabo looked at the table, then at me. The moment of truth had arrived. To my relief, Tabo finally chose me and the truth. He looked terrified, but the sight of the tax bills and the impending sale snapped him out of his paralysis. "We call a family meeting," he announced, his voice regaining a bit of its strength. "Now." We arranged for a mandatory family meeting at Zola's house that evening. Tabo told Zola it was to discuss the new marketing strategy I was supposedly working on, knowing she would be smug and dismissive. I arrived early with Polisa, who helped me set up. While Zola was still in the shower, I found a clever spot in the living room, inside a large ceramic vase, and placed a small, powerful voice recorder. I knew Zola would lie, manipulate, and play the victim, so I needed proof of her behavior tonight. The setup was perfect. Zola would walk in, expecting to announce her heroic sale to save the company, and we would have her on record. When Zola finally entered the living room, she was dressed in a pristine white silk gown, ready for battle. She sat down, crossing her legs, a self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. She didn't suspect a thing. The stage was set, and the air crackled with the silent tension of a coming storm. If you believe a small act of kindness can change everything, please like this video and let me share my story. The restaurant was beautiful, all soft lights and fancy music. It was my 32nd birthday, and Tabo had surprised me with a dinner at the fanciest place in Miami. I wore a new navy dress and I felt loved. For a moment, everything was perfect, but my heart had a tiny, nagging worry. Where was Tabo's mother, Zola? She was supposed to be here. She and I had never gotten along, and I knew her absence meant something. Then I saw her. She walked in late, looking like royalty in a purple suit, followed by 2 of her friends from church. I smiled, trying to be polite, but her eyes were cold. She barely hugged me and immediately sat down, pulling out her phone. She fiddled with it for a moment, and I saw the screen light up with the words "Live." Zola was connecting with her prayer group. I should have guessed something was wrong right then. The waiter poured champagne, and Zola raised her glass. Her eyes met mine, not with warmth, but with a smug, mean look. She leaned slightly toward her friends, but her voice was loud enough to carry. "Watch how I ruin her birthday when I announce the real good news," she snickered. The words hit me like a splash of ice water. I saw her friends on the live feed gasp. My smile vanished. My heart hammered against my ribs, and suddenly the beautiful lights and music felt like a mocking spotlight. I wanted to run, but I was frozen in place, watching my own humiliation unfold. The shock was immediate and complete, throwing me into a silent, terrible crisis. The world seemed to tilt. My hands were shaking, and I could feel the tears pushing against my eyes, but I swallowed hard and forced them back. I would not cry here. Not now. Not in front of her. Before I could even breathe, let alone react, Zola was already on her feet. She held the champagne glass high, beaming, but not at me. "My dear friends," she announced, her voice booming across our table. "We are here to celebrate life." She paused dramatically, letting the suspense build. I knew what was coming, but I was powerless to stop it. "And the real good news is this," she continued, looking right at me with a triumphant gleam. "My beautiful, sweet daughter, Polisa, is expecting her first child. A new heir for the family name. This is a real gift for the family, overshadowing this minor celebration for Naledi." I couldn't move. I hadn't even known Polisa was pregnant. Tabo's younger sister, my sister-in-law, Polisa, was my friend, but Zola had used her joy as a weapon against me. Zola's church friends on the live feed immediately started congratulating her, telling her what a wonderful grandmother she was. The focus, my special day, was gone. It had been stolen, replaced by Zola's cruel show. Tabo's face was a mask of horror and shame. My deep sense of hurt and emotional abuse was immediate. Zola had stripped me of my moment, leaving me exposed and humiliated. I looked at the half-eaten cake, the fancy presents, and then at Zola, who was now soaking up the attention. "I think," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady, "it's time for us to go." The birthday was over, ruined in a flash of malice. The drive home was an agony of silence. The engine hummed, but the quiet in the car was deafening, heavy with everything left unsaid. I stared out the window at the blurred lights of Miami, my mind replaying Zola's smug face and terrible words. The silence was Zola's victory lap, and I couldn't let it continue. "Tabo," I finally said, the name tasting like ash. "Did you know?" My voice was low, dangerously steady. He flinched, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Naledi, no. I didn't know she was going to announce Police's pregnancy there, I swear." I turned in my seat to face him. "Not the announcement, Tabo. Did you know she planned something to ruin the evening? Did you know she wanted to disrupt the party?" He hesitated. Just a second, but it was long enough. He sighed, defeated. She mentioned she had a better idea for the party, that it wasn't fitting for the family's status. I told her to just come and be polite. I didn't think she would do this." I closed my eyes, a fresh wave of hurt washing over me. Tabo hadn't planned the attack, but he had known the threat was there, and he had chosen silence. His failure to warn me, or, better yet, to stand up to his mother, was a betrayal that cut deeper than Zola's malice. Zola was a monster, but Tabo was the coward who let the monster roam free. My deepest hurt was his inaction. My emotional tension was there from the start. My husband had prioritized his mother's vague disapproval over protecting me from certain emotional harm. I knew then that this wasn't just about a birthday. It was about the foundation of my marriage. Back in our luxurious, but now cold, apartment, I stood by the window, feeling utterly alone. The white noise of the city seemed to amplify my inner turmoil. My phone buzzed, pulling me from the dark thoughts. It was Lorado, my best friend, who had been at the party and witnessed the whole ugly scene. Her message was simple: call me.
Now.
When I called, Lorado's voice was shaky with outrage. Girl, I got you, she said quickly. I saw her phone. I saw the live feed. I knew that woman was up to no good. She then dropped the bombshell. I managed to screen record the whole thing. Not just the announcement, Naledi. I got the 5 seconds before it, when she leaned in and said, "Watch how I ruin her birthday when I announce the real good news." A cold calm settled over me. I had irrefutable evidence. Zola's crime wasn't just a spontaneous, thoughtless announcement. It was a premeditated act of cruelty. Lorado sent the video file. I watched it twice. The smirk, the malicious whisper, the celebratory sip of champagne. It was all there. My hand stopped shaking. The overwhelming sadness began to recede, replaced by a steely, quiet resolve. This footage changed everything. It transformed a messy family feud into an intentional, provable emotional abuse case. I was no longer just the victim of a ruined birthday. I was the person holding the key to Zola's true nature. This piece of evidence was my only weapon, and I knew exactly how to use it. The crisis had a new direction. The meeting began, and Zola immediately launched into her usual performance. She started by sighing dramatically and rubbing her temples, claiming the stress of the business was giving her terrible palpitations. This was the guilt trip Polisa had warned me about. I just don't know how much more my poor heart can take, she moaned, setting the tone for her victim narrative. I watched Tabo tense up, ready to fall into his usual submission. But I was ready. I leaned forward and calmly pressed play on the small remote I held in my lap. The vase recorded the muffled, but clear, audio for my birthday. Watch how I ruin her birthday when I announce the real good news. The recording stopped. Zola froze, her eyes wide with shock. Her dramatic posture crumbled instantly. She stammered. What is this? This is ridiculous. Just a joke, Naledi. We were having fun. Her denial was weak, but I didn't dwell on it. I let the small betrayal hang in the air, allowing it to destroy her credibility immediately. Her initial guilt trip had completely backfired. Now, she was defensive, not dominant. I didn't argue. I simply smiled, a thin, cold smile, and transitioned to the real weapon. The air grew thick with Zola's building rage, but I had control. A joke, Zola? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Is this a joke too? I slammed the stack of unpaid tax bills and IRS notices onto the mahogany coffee table. The papers scattered, stark white against the dark wood. Tabo gasped, realizing the true scale of the disaster for the first time. Zola's face went from pale shock to a furious, blotchy red. Where did you get these? She shrieked, scrambling to gather the documents. That is confidential. I ignored her, addressing Tabo and Polisa. For 3 years, Zola has been operating the Sunset Kitchen with reckless abandon, spending company capital on herself and hiding colossal debt. She locked me out not to protect the business, but to prevent me from exposing her failure to the IRS. She wasn't the protector. She was the destroyer. The business revelation was total. Tabo was completely shocked. He looked at the massive figures, then at his mother, a look of profound disappointment and anger on his face. Zola was now openly panicking, trying to snatch the papers back, her carefully cultivated image of the selfless family matriarch completely shattered. She had been exposed as a reckless gambler who risked everything for vanity. Zola was hyperventilating, her carefully placed white gown now rumpled and messy. They're just drafts. Misunderstandings, she insisted, her voice frantic. I was going to fix it. I was protecting us. No, you weren't, I countered, calmly pulling out the printed copy of the old, famous recipe. You were preparing to sell us out to the golden spoon to cover your mistakes and walk away. That's why you kept this so close. I held up the recipe. The only reason the Sunset Kitchen has any value, any goodwill left to save it, is this recipe and the clients I brought in. And now I have it. I explained my leverage. I copied the recipe. I can implement the plan to save the business using the clients and contracts I secured. Or I can expose this recipe publicly, making it worthless, and ensure the golden spoon takes over and you face the consequences. The power dynamic shifted completely. I was no longer the daughter-in-law Zola could dismiss. I was the one holding the keys to the future and the prison door. Zola looked at the paper in my hand, and I saw real fear in her eyes for the first time. The fear of a woman who had lost her ultimate weapon. The room was silent, save for Zola's shallow, fast breathing. She was utterly defeated. Then an external pressure arrived. Zola's phone, which she dropped on the couch, started ringing with a personalized ringtone. The screen showed the name, Mr. Larson, Golden Spoon CEO. This was the final, perfect piece of timing. The rival company was calling to confirm the sale. Zola lunged for the phone, but Tabo was quicker. He snatched it up, looked at me, and nodded. I took the phone and answered. "Hello, Mr. Larson," I said, my voice clear and authoritative. "This is Naledi, the new interim managing director of the Sunset Kitchen." I paused, letting the title sink in. "I'm calling to inform you that we have reviewed all outstanding offers. The Sunset Kitchen is not for sale. The deal is officially off." I hung up and placed the phone back on the table. Zola screamed, a high, raw sound of total loss. Tabo had stood up, Polisa was smiling, and I had just single-handedly killed the deal that was meant to be Zola's escape raft. The power had officially been transferred. The screaming quickly turned to pleading, then to threats. Zola tried every manipulation in her book. She accused Tabo of being brainwashed, me of being a gold digger, and Polisa of betraying her own mother. I let her wear herself out. Then I cut her off. "It stops now, Zola," I stated firmly. "Here is my proposal to save the business." I laid out my plan. I would use the recipes and my contracts to secure a short-term, high-value catering deal, which would give us the capital to pay the most urgent tax penalties. The condition was non-negotiable. Zola had to step down entirely from any financial or managerial role. Tabo would become the official general manager, and I would be the CEO. I called for a vote. Polisa immediately raised her hand. "I vote for Naledi. She's the only one who can save us." Zola glared at her daughter, but Polisa held her gaze. All eyes turned to Tabo. This was his final test. He looked at the chaos Zola had created, then at the solution I offered. He took a deep breath, and his voice was shaky but firm. "I vote with Naledi." Zola was completely outvoted, her power dissolved by the votes of her own children. She stood up, her eyes blazing, and stormed out of the room, promising that we would all regret this. The family meeting was over, but the damage wasn't done. As Zola stormed out, she stopped at the entrance, pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, and flung it onto the table. "You think you've won, Naledi? You'll always be an outsider," she spat, before slamming the door behind her. I looked at the paper. It was a faded, old legal document, a prenuptial agreement draft. I picked it up, my hands trembling again. It outlined terms that would have left me with almost nothing in a divorce, structuring Tabo's assets to protect Zola's family wealth. I hadn't signed a prenup, but this was the draft Tabo had hidden from me when we were engaged. I realized the final, cruel twist. Zola had controlled Tabo not just through guilt, but by the threat of this document. It was a tangible reminder of the secrets he had kept. I looked at Tabo, feeling a fresh wave of hurt. He had let his mother hold this over him, and, by extension, over me. The truth was that Zola's control extended into the deepest, most sacred part of our union. This document confirmed that my marriage had been built on a foundation of his fear and her manipulation. Tabo saw the prenup draft in my hands, and his body sagged. He looked utterly defeated, not by his mother, but by his own past actions. "Naledi, please," he pleaded, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "You let her keep this threat over you? You let her use it to keep me out of the business and silence you?" I asked, my voice heavy with disappointment. Tabo broke down. He sat on the couch, burying his face in his hands. "It was years ago, Naledi. Before we were married. I had an old business venture that failed spectacularly. I almost went bankrupt. Zola bailed me out, but she made me sign a document saying she had financial control over a percentage of my future assets. She used that to create this prenup draft. He lifted his head, tears streaming down his face. I destroyed the signed prenup copy years ago, Naledi. I promise. But she still uses the threat of exposing that old mistake, the financial failure, to keep me compliant. She knew I would lose everything if she exposed it. That's why I was silent. His confession of fear and the revelation of his own hidden weakness was the key to his redemption. It was his deepest secret, one Zola had weaponized against him for years. This was his chance to choose me over his fear, once and for all. With Zola gone and Tabo finally, truly on my side, the apartment felt strangely calm. I immediately got to work, throwing myself into the task of saving the Sunset Kitchen. I couldn't afford to stop. With Mr. Themba's help, I secured an emergency meeting with the IRS, using my detailed marketing plan and the documented, steady revenue stream from my contracts as proof of our viability. I offered the digital copy of the sacred recipe as collateral, a drastic, symbolic gesture that showed I was serious about turning the company around. Within a week, I had successfully negotiated a payment plan for the back taxes. The business was stabilized. Tabo, humbled but resolute, handled the logistical side, focusing on inventory and operations. I was officially appointed the new CEO by the newly formed board, Tabo, Polisa, and myself. My rise was not driven by ambition, but by necessity. I had earned the title by saving the company from ruin. I was no longer just the marketing director. I was the leader who had stared down a crisis and won. The silence in the house was no longer tense. It was productive. The quiet progress was soon disrupted by another Zola-related sting. I started noticing an uptick in negative comments on the catering company's social media, subtle things about my incompetence and recklessness. Then Polisa called, deeply upset. Mama's friend, Lindayo, from the church group, the one who saw the live stream, she's been spreading rumors, saying you're forcing Tabo to sell the assets and that you're an unqualified gold digger who is going to destroy the family name. Zola had activated her network of friends to continue the emotional abuse, aiming to damage my reputation in the community. My old anger flared, but I held it in check. I had the power now, and I would use it professionally. I crafted a concise, powerful video statement. As the new CEO, I calmly and professionally explained the company's recent financial restructuring, showcasing the positive growth projections and thanking the former director for her years of service. Then, I included a brief, factual graphic detailing the exact figures of the previous financial mismanagement, no names, just the numbers. It was a professional, evidence-backed video that, without naming Zola, utterly exposed the truth about the crisis she caused. My friends saw it. My enemies saw it. The narrative was mine. The fallout from the video was swift. The church friends, seeing the undeniable evidence of the financial chaos, retreated. Zola's support network dissolved, replaced by embarrassed silence. Her manipulation only worked when she controlled the information. Now, everyone knew the truth, and the blame was firmly placed. The peace in our apartment grew. A week later, Tabo found a short, curt note on the kitchen counter. It was from Zola. It simply stated that she was moving to her sister's house in another state for a while, claiming she needed space to recover from our cruelty. This was not the cinematic crash I might have once desired. There was no grand confrontation, no cruel banishment. It was a whimper of defeat. She was choosing to run rather than face the consequences of her actions. I folded the note and threw it in the recycling bin. This quiet departure was the best consequence possible. She was no longer our problem. Naledi and Tabo finally had the chance to heal and build a life without the constant presence of her toxicity. Months passed. The Sunset Kitchen stabilized, and I officially filed for the permanent removal of all of Zola's financial authorizations. Polisa had her baby shower, a beautiful, small event that Tabo and I helped organize, putting family first in a healthy way. We even got our anniversary trip. Tabo had planned a surprise, a return to the same resort we had originally booked. The weather was perfect, the ocean a startling blue. On my last morning there, Tabo surprised me with a gift. It wasn't jewelry or a designer purse. It was the old, leather-bound recipe ledger. It was worn and smelled of time. I had this completely digitized and secured with multiple backups, he explained, smiling. But this original belongs to you. You earned it, Naledi. It is the real prize. My eyes filled with tears, not of pain, but of overwhelming gratitude. The ledger symbolized more than just recipes. It symbolized trust and control, the two things Zola had relentlessly tried to take from me. Tabo's actions spoke louder than any apology. He had finally put his full faith and trust in me. This was the true emotional payoff. I sat on the resort balcony, the sound of the ocean a soothing background to my thoughts. I opened my personal laptop and saw a new email. It was from Zola. The subject line was simply, the business. I read her short, neutral message, asking for a vague update on the company's stability. She hadn't changed. She was still probing, trying to find a crack to crawl back through. I smiled to myself, feeling the solid, colorful thread of the commitment bracelet Polisa had made for me on my wrist. I quickly typed my reply. It was brief and final. The business is fine. My birthday was lovely, thank you. I hit send and immediately closed the laptop. My victory wasn't financial. It was the final, firm boundary I had set for myself. I walked back inside to find Tabo and Polisa, who had flown out to join us for a final celebratory weekend. Polisa was bouncing her beautiful, healthy baby on her lap. I sat next to Tabo, leaning into his shoulder. I hadn't just walked away from Zola's abuse. I had walked towards something real, a marriage built on honesty, a career built on merit, and a family built on choice. If you've ever had to fight for your own happiness and set boundaries with toxic people, please share this story to remind others that kindness and self-respect are the only foundations strong enough to build a beautiful life.